Have you ever thought about someone so intensely that your chest tightens? Tightens. This person occupies your thoughts, intrudes into your silences, appears in your dreams, and you tell yourself, this is love. Of course. When you think about someone so much, when you miss someone so much, it must be because you love them, right? Oh, let me tell you something that might surprise you and maybe even make you feel better. No, not necessarily. When you miss someone, it's not always love. And today I would like to accompany you on this delicate exploration, this inner investigation that can free us from so much confusion. I know how troubling this question can be. How many people have I met in my office sitting in front of me, confiding in me with lost eyes, quand? But Christophe, if I think about this person all the time, if I miss them so much, it must be because I love them, right? And in their voices, I hear this quest for certainty, this need to name what they feel. Because we, as human beings, need to understand what is happening inside us. We need to put words to our emotions. But sometimes our emotions are more complex, more nuanced than the simple labels we would like to attach to them. And confusing lack with love is a bit like confusing hunger with hunger. There are two things that are linked, of course, but not identical. We can be hungry without having an appetite. You can have an appetite without really being hungry. In the same way, we can feel a lack of someone without it necessarily being love. So why is this? Why take 2 hours of our lives to explore this nuance? Because, my friends, understanding the true nature of what we feel gives us the freedom to live better together. It prevents us from remaining prisoners of relationships that do not truly nourish us. It allows us to distinguish what builds us up from what destroys. It is, in short, an act of kindness towards ourselves. Let's start with something simple, something very concrete. Try to remember a time when you missed someone. Close your eyes for a moment if you wish. Recall that sensation in your body. Where do you feel it? In your chest? In your stomach? Is this sensation painful? Is it sweet? Is it anxious? Missing someone, you see, is first and foremost a physical sensation before it is a feeling. It is an absence that becomes a presence, a void that takes up space. And our wonderful yet clumsy mind tries to make sense of this sensation. It looks for an explanation, and often the simplest, most obvious explanation is, I miss this, love them. But let's take a moment to look more closely. Missing someone can have many faces and origins, and distinguishing between them is like learning a new language, the language of our true emotions. Sometimes what we mistake for love is actually nostalgia. You know, that melancholic feeling that comes over us when we think about what is no longer there. I remember a patient, let's call her Marie, who told me that she thought about her ex-partner constantly. She couldn't sleep anymore. She checked her social media several times a day. She pined for him. I still love him, she told me with certainty. When we dug a little deeper, we discovered together that it wasn't quite so much him that she missed, but the relation of herself that she had with him. At that time in her life, she was more carefree, more lighthearted. She had fewer responsibilities, she laughed more easily, and, without realizing it, she had associated this well-being with the presence of this man. What she really regretted was that the period of her life, not necessarily the person she had experienced it with. Nostalgia is a powerful emotion. It embellishes the past. It gives it a golden hue. It makes us forget the difficult mornings, the arguments, the misunderstandings. It only keeps the good memories like a photographic filter that softens the contrasts. And in this subdued light of memory, the absent person seems irreplaceable, unique, essential. But loving someone and regretting what we experience with someone are not the same thing. Love looks to the future. It feeds on the present. It wants to build. Nostalgia looks in the rearview mirror. It feeds on the past. It wants to reconstruct what is no longer there. Then there's another form of missing that we often confuse with love. Missing what the person brought us without it being the person themselves that we really miss. It's subtle, I know. Let me explain. Imagine someone who used to make you laugh. Someone who brightened your days with their humor and lightheartedness, ilalatedness. That person disappears from your life and suddenly you feel sad and heavy. You think, I miss that person terribly, but is that really the person you miss? Or is it the laughter that made you feel? Is it their deepest essence that you miss? Or is it the service they provided you without even knowing it? I'm thinking of Thomas, a man who came to see me saying that he couldn't forget a former colleague. He spoke to me about her in passionate words. I miss her every day, he told me. As we explored together, we realized that this woman was the only person in his office who valued him. She complimented his work, asked for his opinion, and made him feel competent and appreciated. When she left to work elsewhere, Thomas found himself in an environment where no one gave him that recognition. What he really missed was that feeling of being seen or being valued, not necessarily as an irreplaceable person. The proof is that a few months later, when he changed departments and found a more appreciative team, he stopped thinking about her with that painful intensity. It's not cynical to acknowledge that. It's not diminishing our relationships to admit that they bring us specific things. We are beings of need. We need recognition, security, stimulation, comfort, and some people respond to those needs in remarkable ways. When they disappear, the need remains. We sometimes confuse the lack of satisfaction of this need with the lack of the person themselves. Moreover, true love is something else. True love is when we miss the person in their entirety, with their flaws, contradictions, and dark areas, illiras. It is when we cannot reduce this lack to a list of services rendered or needs satisfied. It is when what we speak presence in the world, their very existence, not just what they bring to us, not just what they bring to us. And then there is the lack that comes from habit. Habit, that invisible force that structures our lives, that creates automatisms, routines, expectations, derashums. We humans are creatures of habit. Our brains love predictable patterns. When they settle into them and are broken, even if they were not particularly pleasant, we feel momo. Think of those couples who break up after years of a mediocre or even toxic relationship. How many of them feel lost in the first few weeks? How many feel this emptiness? This absence makes them believe they made a mistake, that they still love the other person. But when you listen carefully to what they say, you hear, in the evening, I don't know what to do anymore. Sunday mornings seem strange to me. I no longer have anyone to tell about my day. Even if before, that person didn't really listen to me. What they lack is structure, predictability, the even uncomfortable comfort of knowing what to expect. The human brain often prefers familiar unhappiness to unknown happiness. It's disturbing, but it's true. I worked with Sophie, a woman who was coming out of a relationship where she was constantly criticized. Her partner put her down, minimized her successes, and doubted her abilities. When she finally found the courage to leave, she expected to feel relieved. And she did. But she was also overwhelmed by a feeling of loss that made her feel guilty. How can I want to go back to someone who hurt me so much? She asked with tears in her eyes. What she didn't yet understand was that she didn't want to go back to him. She wanted to go back to familiarity, to what she knew, even if what she knew hurt her. Her brain, disoriented by the change, and interpreted this disarray as a sign of love. If I feel so bad without him, it's because I love him, she thought. Which in reality, she felt bad because change is difficult, because rebuilding our life requires energy, because the unknown is scary. Over time, Sophie learned to distinguish between lack of habit and true love. She understood that what she lacked wasn't him, but the routine. And she built new routines that were healthier and more nourishing. The lack dissipated like a fog in the morning sun. Now let's talk about a particularly deceptive form of lack. The lack that comes from a wounded ego. This is subtle, even sneaky, because it often disguises itself very well as great love. Have you ever noticed how someone you are only moderately interested in can suddenly occupy all your thoughts at the moment they turn away from you? Yesterday, you were indifferent. Today, because they no longer respond to your messages, or because when she seems interested in someone else, you can't think of anything else. You want her. You miss her terribly. Is this love? Or is it your ego that refuses to be rejected? That refuses not to be chosen? Our ego is fragile, my friends. It needs to be recognized, desired, chosen. And when it isn't, it rebels, it screams. It makes you believe that you are madly in love, when in reality, you are simply hurt in your self-esteem. I remember Laurent, who came to see me because he couldn't get over a woman he had only been seeing for a few weeks. I've never felt this way about anyone, he told me. She's everything to me. I can't live without her. But when I asked him to describe this woman to me, he struggled to give me precise details about her personality, her dreams, her fears. What he was able to describe very well, however, was the moment when she told him she didn't want to see him anymore. The shock. The incomprehension. But why? What had I done wrong? What obsessed Laurent wasn't her. It was the rejection. It was this unsolved enigma. Why wasn't I good enough? His mind was spinning, trying to understand, to find an explanation, to fix something that eluded him, and he interpreted this obsession as passionate love. We worked together so that he could face this uncomfortable truth. What he was missing wasn't this specific woman, but the validation he sought through her. He wanted to be the one who decided to leave, not the one who was left. He wanted to be chosen, desired, confirmed in his worth. And that's a legitimate, understandable aspiration. But it's not love. True love is interested in the other person. The wounded ego is interested in itself. Love asks, how are you? What do you need? The wounded ego asks, why don't I? What's wrong with me? If anything you've heard so far resonates with you, if you are beginning to see these nuances in your own experiences, take a moment to subscribe to this channel da soli. That way, you'll continue to receive more insights that can support you on your path to self-knowledge. It's free, and it's a way of telling us that this work matters to you. Let's continue our exploration. There's also this lack that comes from the fear of loneliness. Loneliness. That word that is so frightening in our hyper-connected society. Sometimes we're so afraid of being alone that we confuse the presence of someone, anyone, with love. Some people can't stand being alone, not even for a few hours. The silence of the apartment drains away their anxieties. The absence of a message on their phone plunges them into worry. They need to feel that they exist in someone's eyes. And with that person, when her gaze disappears, she feels a dizzying emptiness. I miss her so much, they say. But sometimes, what they really miss is not being alone anymore. It's having someone, no matter who, to fill that existential void that frightens them. Claire came to see me after a breakup. She spoke to me about her ex in passionate terms. He was the love of my life, she said. However, when she dug a little deeper, she admitted that he argued constantly, that he didn't have much in common, and that she often felt misunderstood with him. But at least I wasn't alone, she finally whispered. And that's where we got to the heart of the matter, Aja. Claire had learned at a very young age that loneliness was dangerous. As a child, being alone meant being forgotten, abandoned. She had built her adult life around avoiding that feeling at all costs. She would bounce from one relationship to another, and when she found herself alone, even briefly, she would panic. Her brain interpreted this lack of presence as a lack of love, when in reality it was a lack of companionship, a need to avoid facing the inner silence. We worked together to help her come to terms with loneliness, to discover that being alone doesn't mean being abandoned, that she can exist without the constant gaze of others. And gradually, she began to make a crucial distinction. I wanted to be with this person because I truly love them, or I want to be with this person because I'm afraid of being alone. This question, my friends, is liberating. It allows us to cleanse our relationships of this fear that poisons them. Because a relationship built on the fear of loneliness is not a relationship of love, it is a relationship of dependence. And dependence, even if it sometimes looks like passion, is not love. True love is not afraid of loneliness. It even respects it. It knows that everyone needs moments of inner silence, of reconnecting with their own company. Love. I choose to be with you, not because I can't be without you, but because being with you enriches my life. And then there is this form of lack that is rarely talked about, but is nevertheless so widespread, the lack that arises from the unfinished, the unresolved. This lack that inhabits us when a relationship has ended without any real conclusion, without words exchanged, without mutual understanding. Just a door that closes, and we are left outside with 1,000 unanswered questions. Our mind does not like endless stories. It does not like interrupted chapters. It needs closure, a sense of understanding. And when it does not get it, goes round in circles. It ruminates, it imagines, it tries to complete the puzzle with the missing pieces. Why did she leave without an explanation? What did I do wrong? If only I could talk to her one last time to understand. These questions occupy my mind day and night. When we interpret this obsession as a sign of deep love, if I think about this person so much, it is because I still love them. But sometimes it is not the person that we miss. It is the understanding that's missing. It's the end of the story that we're missing. It's the final point that was never written. I accompanied Mathieu, whose partner had left him overnight without really explaining why. She had gone to live in another city, had cut ties. 2 years later, Mathieu still thought about her every day. He analyzed their last conversation, looking for clues. He imagined scenarios. He tortured himself with essays. Do you still love her? I asked him one day. He thought for a long time before answering. I don't know. I don't know who she is anymore. I don't even know if I really knew who she was. But I need to understand. I need to know why. This need to know, this need for closure, can disguise itself as love. It can generate a lack that is as intense, as painful as true heartbreak. But it's not the same thing. It's our mind trying to close a loop that remained open. It is our need for meaning that is crying out. Liberation, in these cases, does not necessarily come from obtaining the answers we seek. Often, these answers will never come, or if they do, they will be disappointing and incomplete. Liberation comes from our ability to accept the unfinished, to say, I may never know, and it's hard, but I can live with this uncertainty. I can write the ending of this story myself, even if it will never be perfect. By the way, on this subject, I would like to invite you to do something. A QR code will appear on your screen, and you will also find a link in the description of this video. These links will take you to a selection of very interesting books on personal development, self-knowledge, psychology, and hintmeyuta ultai to life. These are not my books, I want to make that clear, but they are works that I find valuable to accompany your personal reflection. If these topics touch you, if you want to go further in this exploration of yourself, I encourage you to take a look at them. They are companions on your journey who can light your path. Let's get back to our topic. Let's now talk about a form of lack that I often observe in my practice, and which is perhaps one of the most painful to recognize. The lack that comes from idealization. The lack not of the real person, but of the imagined, dreamed of, idealized person. We all have this extraordinary and at the same time dangerous ability, that of projecting onto the other person what we would like them to be. We take some real traits of their personality and build around them a whole complete character which corresponds exactly to what we dream of at our rules. And sometimes we fall in love with this imaginary character, not the real person. When the relationship ends, or when reality shatters our imaginary construction, we feel an immense lack, laatsteusnis. This person was perfect for me, we think. But was she really perfect? Where was perfect? Isabel told me her story. She had met a man while traveling. They had spent a few days together. Intense, magical. Then each returned to their own lives, to their own countries. For months, Isabel thought about him constantly. She wrote him poetic messages. She imagined their life together. She pined for him with an intensity that consumed her. One day, this man came to visit her. Isabel was feverish, excited. Finally, they were going to be together again. But after 2 days, she began to feel uncomfortable. This man wasn't quite the one she had imagined, and he had opinions that she found disturbing, habits that irritated her, a way of being that didn't match the image she had built for herself. I was disappointed, she confided to me. But above all, I realized that during all those months, I hadn't been in love with him. I had been in love with a version of him that I had created in my head. And that version was perfect because I had it to be perfect. What Isabel was missing wasn't this real man with his complexities and contradictions. He was the ideal man that she had imagined. He was the dream. And the dreams, by definition, are elusive, unreal. We all do this to varying degrees. We take the parts of the other person that we like and ignore or minimize, that bother us. We create a watered-down, improved version of the person. And when that person is no longer there, it is this fantasy version that we miss. not necessarily the real person in all their complexity. True love looks the other person in the face. It sees their flaws, their limitations, their dark areas, and it chooses to love anyway, not in spite of their imperfections, but with them, because they are part of the whole, the totality of the person. True love says, I see you as you are, and it is you that I love. Which the lack of idealization says, I miss you, but in reality, it is what I imagined of you that I miss. It is the potential that I saw in you. This is the person I hoped you would become. This distinction is crucial because if we don't make it, we risk spending our lives searching for someone who doesn't exist. We risk rejecting real, imperfect, but loving people because they don't fit our ideal image. We risk clinging to ghosts rather than flesh and blood beings. Courage. There's also the lack that comes from what I call emotional dependency. And here, we touch on something very deep, often rooted in our personal history, in our childhood. Emotional dependency is when our sense of identity, our personal worth, depends entirely on the gaze and love of the other. It's when we exist only to the extent that we are loved. It's when without the other, we feel empty, incomplete, and worthless. People who suffer from emotional dependency often confuse this vital need for the other with love. I can't live without you, she says, and she means it. But is it love, or is it psychological survival? Love says, I can live without you, but I choose to live with you because you enrich my life. Dependency says, I can't live without you because without you, I am nothing. I met Amélie, a brilliant and talented, who systematically found herself in relationships where she completely forgot about herself. She adapted her taste to those of her partner. She gave up her activities to be available to him. She measured her worth every day by the amount of attention he gave her. When her last partner left her, Amélie collapsed. My life no longer makes sense without him, she told me. I love him so much that I don't know who I am without him. And in that very sentence was contained the entire problem. She no longer knew who she was without him. Her identity had melted into the relationship. She no longer existed as a separate autonomous person. What she called love was in reality an anxious fusion, a desperate need to feel complete through the other. And when the other left her, she didn't just feel Attachment, she felt an I. Who am I? What is my value if no one loves me? We worked together for a long time, patiently, so that Amélie could rebuild a sense of self independent of the love of the other, so that she could discover that she had value in herself, not just in someone's loving gaze, so that she could learn to love hers before seeking love outside. And gradually, something wonderful happened. She began to distinguish the desperate need to be loved, the healthy desire to share her life with someone uzareke. She began to understand that what she really lacked in her old relationships was not the people themselves, but the external confirmation of her own worth. And she could learn to give herself that confirmation. Emotional deprivation, my friends, is like a plant that clings to a stake. Without the stake, it falls. But a healthy plant has its own roots, its own strength. It can appreciate the stake, lean on it in difficult times, but it does not collapse when it is no longer there. Let us now talk about the loss that can arise from the trauma of rejection. This is particularly insidious because it activates very deep wounds. Some people have had very painful experiences of rejection in their lives. Sometimes in childhood, sometimes in adolescence, sometimes in adulthood. These experiences have left a mark, a particular sensitivity to rejection. And when someone leaves them or moves away, it is not only that loss that they experience. It's the activation of all previous losses, all past rejections. The loss she feels is amplified by this resonance with the past. It becomes disproportionate, overwhelming, and they may think, if I'm suffering so much, it's because I really loved this person deeply. When in reality, part of their suffering comes from the past, not the present. It's as if the current loss is pressing on an old wound that has never really healed. The pain is real and intense, but it's not entirely linked to the person who has just left. It's linked to the accumulation of all the times we've felt rejected, abandoned, not good enough. Damien came to see me after a breakup that had devastated him. His partner had left him for someone else. The pain he felt was so intense that he had difficulty functioning. He couldn't sleep or eat anymore. "I've never loved someone so much," he told me. Exploring his story, I discovered that as a child, Damien had experienced abandonment by his father. One day, his father left and never returned. No explanation, no contact, just emptiness. And little Damien had grown up with this nagging question, why? Why am I not good enough for him to stay? When his partner left him for another man, she not only broke their relationship, she reactivated this door. The message Damien heard was not just this woman prefers someone else. Once again, I am not good enough. Once again, I am being left for someone better. The pain he felt was therefore twofold. There was the legitimate pain of losing this relationship, but there was also the pain of all those times he had felt inadequate, rejected, abandoned. By becoming aware of this, Damien was able to begin to untangle the threads. He was able to grieve the loss of his current relationship while also beginning to heal his childhood wound. And he realized that the intensity of his missing someone did not necessarily correspond to the depth of his love for this specific woman, but to the depth of his old wound. This realization is liberating. It allows us not to overinterpret the intensity of our emotions. It reminds us that our present reactions are sometimes colored, amplified by our past history. We now come to an important point in our reflection. If missing someone is not always love, then how do we distinguish one from the other? How do we know if what we are feeling is true love or one of these other forms of missing someone that we have been talking about? I would like to offer you some questions, some guides that can help you in this inner exploration. First question. Am I thinking of this person as they really are or as I would like them to be? Am I able to accurately describe their personality, their flaws, their fears, their dreams, or am I mostly thinking about an idealized version, their potential, what they could become? If you realize that you are mostly thinking about an imagined version of the person, it is possible that what you are missing is your projection, not the real person. Second question. Does this lack make me grow or make me regress? True love, even in separation, pushes us to become better. It inspires us, it elevates us. Toxic lack makes us shrink. It obsesses us, it prevents us from living. It makes us go round in circles. If your lack paralyzes you, obsesses you to the point that you can no longer function in your daily life for months, there may be something more at play than simple heartbreak. Then, very question, do I want this person to be happy even without me? True love wants the good of the other person. It can be sad about the separation. He may hope for a reunion, but deep down, he wants the other person to be happy. He is capable of saying, I would prefer you to be with me, but if you are happy somewhere else, then I want you to be happy. The lack of the wounded ego, he cannot conceive of the other person's happiness without himself. He thinks, how can she be happy without me? She should be unhappy like I am. There's a desire for revenge, for justice. If I am suffering, she should suffer too. Fourth question, what do I specifically miss? Try to be very specific. Is it their physical presence? The way they looked at me? The laughter we shared? The feeling of security they gave me? The validation they gave me? By identifying precisely what you are missing, you can begin to understand the nature of your lack. If what you are missing is essentially the way this person made how feel valued. So maybe what you really miss is the appreciation, not necessarily the person. Does this feeling subside over time or does it intensify? Genuine heartbreak usually follows a downward curve. First few days and weeks are the hardest. Then, gradually, there are ups and downs, of course, but there is a general tendency towards relief. If, on the contrary, months after the breakup, your obsession intensifies, if you think about the person even more than you did at the beginning, there may be an obsessive dimension linked to something other than love. Perhaps to the need for closure, perhaps to a wounded ego, perhaps to an older wound. Question 6. Can I imagine being happy without this person? True love might say, I'd be happier with you, but I can build a rich and satisfying life without you. Emotional dependency says without you, my life has no meaning. I'll never be happy. If you absolutely cannot imagine a happy future without this specific person, if your happiness depends on their presence, then you are probably in a form of addiction rather than holy love of. These questions are not judgments, my friends. They are not ways of me telling you that what you are feeling is invalid. All of these lacks that we have talked about are real. The pain they cause is real. They deserve compassion and attention. But understanding them, naming them correctly, is giving ourselves a means to better manage them. Because we do not heal from a wounded ego, like the same way we heal from genuine heartbreak. We do not get over emotional dependency the same way we grieve a loving relationship that simply did not work out. Let's take a moment to talk about true love. Because underlying everything we have said is a question. So what is true love? How do we recognize it? True love, in my experience and observations, has certain distinct characteristics. First, it is liberating, not confining. True love does not imprison you. It does not cut you off from your friends, your passions, or yourself. It gives you wings rather than chains. You feel more like yourself in this love, not less. Second, it is benevolent. True love wants your good and the good of the other. It is not selfish, possessive, or pathologically jealous. It may have moments of jealousy, that is human, but that is not its primary mode of operation. Love says, I want you to flourish, even if sometimes that requires effort or adjustments. True love is also realistic. It does not live in a fantasy world where everything is perfect. It sees the flaws, the difficulties, the differences, and it chooses to stay anyway. It chooses to work through the difficulties, to grow through them. It does not deny reality, it embraces it. True love is patient. It understands that people change, evolve, and sometimes need time. It does not demand immediate perfection. It accompanies and supports. It sometimes waits without forgetting itself. And above all, true love is chosen. It is not a compulsion. It is not a, I can help it. It is a day after day, I choose this person, this relationship, this commitment. It is an act of will as much as it is a feeling. When you truly love someone and you miss them, you do indeed feel a void, just a light. But it is a void that honors the beauty of what was shared. It is a void that is remembered with tenderness. It is a void that can coexist with gratitude for what was moth, even if it is no longer. The craving that comes from true love says, "You were precious in my life. Your presence enriched it. I'm sad that you're no longer here, but I'm grateful for what we shared, and I can move forward, carrying within me what our relationship taught me. The other forms of craving we've talked about have a different tone. They're more bitter, more obsessive, more desperate. They say, I can go on without you. You have to come back. It's not fair. I don't understand. How could you do this to me? Listen to the voice of your craving. What exactly is she saying? The words she uses will give you clues as to her true nature. I would now like to address a very important aspect. What should we do with all this understanding? What is the point of distinguishing between these different forms of lack if, in the end, the pain remains the same? Well, precisely the pain does not remain the same. When you understand the nature of your lack, you can begin to respond to it appropriately. If you realize that your lack is mainly nostalgia for a time in your life, you will not seek to relive that exact time, which is impossible. Instead, you will seek to find in your present the qualities that made that time enjoyable. Perhaps carefreeness, lightness, the feeling of having time, and you will discover that there are 1,000 ways to cultivate these qualities today without having to go back to the past. If you realize that what you are missing is what a person brought you, for example, recognition or support, you can consciously seek to cultivate these elements in your current life. Share. You can diversify your sources of recognition. You can learn to give yourself what you expect from others. You can build a net of relationships that meet different needs instead of expecting everything from one person. If you understand that your lack is tied to habit, that it will naturally diminish as you create new routines. You can speed up this process by consciously building new rituals, new structures in your life. If you recognize that your ego is hurt, you can work on accepting rejection, on understanding that someone's rejection does not define your worth. That you can be a wonderful person and not be the right partner for someone in particular. The two are not mutually exclusive. If you identify a fear of loneliness, you can begin the work of taming that loneliness. Spend time alone on purpose. Discover that you are interesting company for yourself. Learn to distinguish loneliness from isolation. If you need closure, you can write it yourself. You can write a letter that you may never see, but that says everything you needed to say. You can create a hunger ritual, a symbolic moment where you say goodbye to this story. If you have idealized the person, you can consciously recall their complete reality, making a list of their faults, as well as their qualities. You recall the difficult moments as well as the wonderful ones. Bring the image down to a more human, more real scale. If you are emotionally dependent, you can perhaps begin with the help of a therapist, the work of rebuilding your own identity, rediscovering your passions, rediscovering your friendships, itreglin a rare the value you pop in yourself. And if your lack resonates with old wounds, you can undertake the work of healing these wounds. Understand that today's pain is activating something much older, and that truly healing involves dealing with this old wound, not just the present situation. You see, each type of loss has its own healing path. And that's why it's so important to distinguish between them. Because if you apply the wrong remedy to the wrong disease, you risk prolonging your suffering unnecessarily. Someone who is in a wounded ego and tries to heal by saying, I really love this person, I just need to give my grief time, risk that is stagnating. Because time alone won't heal a wounded ego. So what's needed is work on acceptance, on self-esteem, on the ability to tolerate rejection. Similarly, someone who is in genuine pain of love, but who says to themselves, I'm just dependent, I have to learn to be alone. Strewn risks doing themselves unnecessary violence because mourning the loss of a true and holy love is necessary and has nothing to do with addiction. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. If this content helps you on your own path, I invite you to subscribe and share with someone who might need it. Sometimes putting words to what we are experiencing can be the beginning of transformation. Now, I would like to address something delicate but important. How do we deal with the judgment of others when we are going through these different forms of lack? Because you see, when we are suffering, when we miss someone terribly, we are vulnerable. And in this vulnerability, the well-intentioned comments of those around us can sometimes hurt us more than they help us. But come on, you had only been dating this person for a few weeks, so why are you suffering so much? You should be relieved this relationship was toxic. It is time to move on. You're being dramatic. You may have heard these phrases, or perhaps you've said them yourself to someone who was suffering from a lack that you didn't understand. The truth is that the pain of loss is not proportional to the length of the relationship or its objective quality. Someone can suffer intensely from the loss of a relationship of a few weeks if that relationship awakened deep wounds or met fundamental needs. And someone can continue to miss a toxic person because emotional dependency doesn't respond to rational logic. And this is precisely where our understanding of the different forms of loss becomes a tool for compassion. Not only for ourselves, but also for others. When someone around you suffers from a lack that seems disproportionate or incomprehensible to you, instead of judging, you can ask yourself, what form of loss is it? What is really at stake here? If you understand that your friend that's suffering both the loss of that specific person and their bruised ego, you won't tell them you really love them that much. You might tell them, I understand that rejection hurts. Your worth doesn't depend on whether or not someone chooses you. If you see someone stuck in a toxic relationship out of emotional dependency, you won't simply say, why don't you leave them? Why don't you leave them? They're hurting you. You will understand that for this person, leaving means facing a terrifying existential void. And you will accompany them patiently in their process. This compassionate understanding must first be offered us. Stop judging us because we should have moved on or because it does not make sense to suffer so much. The suffering of loss is not always logical. It is not always proportional, but it is always real and always deserves compassion and respect at the same time. And this is a delicate balance. Having compassion for our suffering does not mean wallowing in it. Understanding that our loss comes, for example, from habit or a wounded ego is not minimizing our pain. It is giving us the means to get out of it. It is like if you had a sore leg, the doctor who diagnoses a fracture does not minimize your pain. On the contrary, he takes it seriously by identifying exactly what is wrong, which allows him to propose the right treatment. If your leg is not broken, but simply stride the rule, the treatment will be different. But in both cases, the pain is real and deserves attention. In the same way, identifying the nature of your lack is not a way of telling yourself to not. That's all there is to it. It's a way of saying this is precisely what it is, and here's how we can respond to it. Now let's talk about time. Time.